You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou. It's Wednesday, which means we're looking ahead to another week of NFL action. This time, staring down the barrel at week number 9 of the NFL. We are just about at the midway point of the season. Once this week wraps up, we'll already be halfway through the entirety of the regular season. Can't believe we're already at this point here, but we got to take a look at some Thursday night football action today. So as I always do, I invite you all to comment down below. Let me hear from you, your thoughts, your opinions on the Thursday night football matchup. Can the Miami Dolphins take the spark from last week against the Atlanta Falcons and keep it rolling against a team that could be back on the rise with Lamar Jackson and a lot of players returning over the last few weeks getting healthy in the Baltimore Ravens? Plenty to discuss and get into, so fire away and let me hear from you. But Ravens going into Miami to take on this Dolphins team. Both of these teams in a spot where their seasons have just not gone the way they were hoping to, as they both currently sit on 2 wins so far this year. Miami coming off of the best performance they've had this season collectively as a team, and especially on the defensive side of the football against Atlanta. A lot of people looked at that game, myself included, like a really big opportunity for Bijan Robinson to potentially have himself a career performance, because going into that game last week, Miami was, at that point, at least statistically speaking, the league's worst run defense by a bit of a margin. However, they go into that game, and when it was all said and done, allowing a total of 45 yards on the ground to the entirety of the Atlanta Falcons. And the reason I bring this up is because you look at the way this Ravens team is built. Yes, they can throw the football. Yes, Lamar Jackson, very good passer, and we'll get into that in a second. But it's all about what they are able to do on the ground. And it has been a very up and down season at this point here for Derrick Henry. However, the last couple of weeks feels like maybe he's starting to find himself as this team continues to get more and more healthy. And it feels like the offense is starting to get itself back on track and refine its identity. And that is, of course, by leaning on the back of the monster and king himself in Derrick Henry, having 193 yards on the ground with a couple of touchdowns over these last 2 weeks of games for the Ravens. It seems like they're starting to figure it out. So I'll be curious to see if what we saw from Miami's defense last week was just a combination of really good play and being ready for the moment, and also the Atlanta Falcons dealing with a lot of injuries, missing obviously their star quarterback, and maybe that allowed Miami to key in a little bit more on just Bijan Robinson as a whole. I'll be curious to see what the actual truth of that performance was, because this Ravens team will certainly be a test. And again, especially as Derrick Henry now seems to be finding his footing this season with a couple of strong back-to-back performances. His 2 best games, most recently, are his 2 best games since that opening night where it looked like he was going to run back what he did last year for another whole season. And it's been obviously a long handful of weeks since then. So looking forward to seeing how Miami buckles down defensively and tries to bottle up the run game. The other thing I'll be looking at here, because it's a small trend that I think it's easy to forget, because the Ravens had a good performance, at least defensively, against the Rams before going into a bye week. But now, 2 games in a row, allowing no more than 17 points against the Rams prior to that bye week, and then, of course, against the Chicago Bears this past week. It feels like the Ravens defense might be figuring it out. If you ask just about anybody that's probably outside of Baltimore, and you go, what do you think of the Ravens defense so far this season? They'll probably tell you it's a pretty bad defense. They might even mention the fact that the team is really banged up, but that's because you might not be in the know. But if you look at what they've been doing, like I said, these last 2 games that they've played, they've come away with a turnover. They have shut things down on the ground. They held both Chicago and LA to under 100 yards rushing as a team. And a lot of that has to do with people just slowly but surely working their way back into this defense. At one point, it felt like, I believe it was like 6, maybe 7 different starters on just the defensive side of the football alone that were missing significant time due to injury. But now that everyone has basically returned, and the only person you're missing now is Nnamdi Madubuike, who obviously a big and important name to that, but he won't be coming back, it sounds like, due to the, I believe, his neck injury that he's dealing with that took him out for the year. Your defense is essentially fully healthy now, and you got all those guys back. Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, you name it, they are back in the fold after missing some time. And something tells me this defense might be turning it around. And when you look at the performance of this Miami Dolphins offense to this point in a season, yes, last week, really impressive. A lot of success from the running back room, well north of 100 yards rushing on the ground between Devon Achane and Ollie Gordon, who is starting to maybe carve himself out a nice little role in that Dolphins run game. But also Tua's best performance of the season as well, throwing 4 touchdown passes in that win over the Atlanta Falcons. It feels like now this is the test and the opportunity for Baltimore. Is it real? Are they able to shut down a Dolphins team that seemed to have found themselves last week against what had been to that point a pretty stout Atlanta Falcons defense, especially against the pass? A lot of intrigue with how both of these teams are coming into this game here. Again, the Dolphins offense flatlined, and yeah, injury has had a piece of it. They haven't had Tyreek Hill for some time, but for the most part, it's just been kind of a failed operation more than anything else. Tua has not played well prior to last week's game. He had 6 interceptions over the course of 2 games, throwing 3 picks in both of those 2 games prior to last week. So you have that on that side of the football. And again, the Ravens defense, due to a lot of injuries, has just been an absolute mess the way they've been letting teams move and score on them. So I really like the dynamic that you have in this game between both teams, where it's like an offense that has not lived up to expectations to this point, finally finding its footing, and now gets a challenge against a defense who banged up, not performing well. A lot of people questioning what was going on over there, finding its footing the last couple of games and looking to show everybody that this is real and that this is going to be how it is the back half of the season here. The last thing we got to get into, and it's a very obvious one and why I saved it for last, because I'm sure anyone who's talking about this game is going to mention it, it's Lamar Jackson and how he looks coming back into the fold. Lamar Jackson at this point in his career, it's kind of very obvious, but for anyone who may at this point not realize it, he has become one of the most efficient passers in the NFL. So much so that if you weren't aware, Lamar Jackson currently leads the NFL all-time in career passer rating at 103. He has the highest rating amongst anyone who has ever graced an NFL field as a quarterback. On top of that, when I get a little bit further, when it comes to touchdown to pass ratio, nobody throws more touchdowns except for 3 other quarterbacks all time per pass attempt, than Lamar Jackson. He throws the football as well as anybody, and the numbers, historically speaking, already speak to that in his, I guess, semi-young career. I mean, it's crazy because Lamar's been in the league now since, 2018? We're about 7-8 years into his career now, so it's been some time, but for Lamar Jackson to already be near the top of that in terms of just passing efficiency, it's incredible to see. And you see the way he looked coming into this year prior to going down with the hamstring injury, nearly 900 yards passing, 10 touchdowns, a singular interception, completion rate pushing near 72%. He was continuing on that pace and that tear that he has been on for the last handful of seasons, obviously coming off of a monster season last year as a passer. And you got to look at that because the way Miami's secondary has been dealt the cards this season, it's not been great. They are hurt and hurt bad. As it currently stands right now, and Storm Duck just recently joining the fray, I believe once again, because if I'm remembering correctly, he was already dealing with something, but he is on the IR now, joining 5 other defensive backs on the IR in some capacity, whether it's just a regular IR placement, if it's a DFR, that's somebody that's going to be returning soon, if it's a practice squad player that's on the IR. They got 6 different guys currently sitting on there, headlined by Storm Duck, like I mentioned, but also Artie Burns, Kader Quote, there's a lot of guys from that unit that are not going to be on that football field for this matchup here. And I don't want to sit here and act like Baltimore has the most impressive and lethal wide receiver room in the NFL, but the way things have been looking so far, Zay Flowers is, of course, who he is. Dynamic threat for this offense. And then, of course, DeAndre Hopkins, who, sure, maybe at this stage in his career has lost a little bit of a step, but is still as sure-handed as they come in the NFL. And yeah, he might not get the looks his way, but his hands are still amongst the best, in my opinion, with some of the circus-like catches we've seen from this guy this year. It's one of those things that I feel like is easy to forget because, again, the current state of the Ravens and just the way this passing attack has had to work over the last handful of weeks minus Lamar Jackson, it's not been great, but now that you have Jackson back in the fold, you can utilize those guys. It should open things back up for Derrick Henry, who, again, is starting to catch fire here. You also have to wonder just how he looks with that hamstring. How mobile is he? You look at where Miami stands right now against quarterbacks. When they run with the football, they currently rank 9th most in the NFL in rushing yards allowed to QBs. So teams have been able to, with a mobile quarterback, been able to get the better of them. Obviously, when you're playing teams like or the Buffalo Bills with the Josh Allen, those numbers might be a little bit higher than some of the other teams, but a lot of quarterbacks are starting to get mobile these days, and I'll be curious to see just how much the Ravens try to exploit knowing that, and I'm curious to see just how willing Lamar Jackson is to take off and run with that football and do what he does best and just break people's ankles out on that football field because he's unbelievably dynamic. That being said, as far as who as far as who I think is going to win this matchup, it's interesting. Both of these teams are in must-win situations. The Ravens, if they want to get to the playoffs, basically need to win out. The Dolphins need to win out, but they also need a lot to break their way, and I feel like we're seeing some cracks in the AFC North that might benefit the Ravens long-term as the season progresses, whereas with Miami, unfortunately, the Patriots and Bills look like they're going to be running the table in this division and trying to figure out who sits atop when it's all said and done, and it might be tough for Miami in this position that they're in to crack the playoffs, even as like a 7 seed or something along those lines. But I also I don't believe in Miami right now, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to go with the Baltimore Ravens on this one. I think they get it done, and I think they get it done pretty handedly. I am in the camp of this Ravens team, especially on the defensive side of the football, has gotten healthy and has figured it out. These last 2 games that they've played have definitely shown me that. The Chicago Bears offense might not be the best in the NFL, but they're certainly not the worst, and they were coming into that game against them last week pretty strong. Prior to that, they did an excellent job, despite their offense not really being able to do anything, in holding it down and keeping that game close against the Rams. And again, a 17-3 loss, just imagine if you actually were able to put some offensive production there. We're talking a potential Ravens upset in that game, all things considered with where they stood going into that matchup. I think the Ravens win this game, and I also think they win this game very handedly. This game kind of feels like a Baltimore Ravens beat down in a kind of, we're here, we're back, the season's not over, it doesn't look good, but we are going to bring it to everyone to the very end. That's the type of competitor that Lamar Jackson is. That's the type of competitor Derrick Henry is. And I think the way this team's culture is built, that is the type of football team that this is. It was not pretty for a few weeks, but I think the Ravens are back, and I think they make that statement in front of a national audience tomorrow on Thursday Night Football. So give me the Ravens, dominant victory, 35-17. They walk away feeling really good. Everyone's going to be talking that Friday morning. Baltimore's back. Get ready for their playoff push. It's going to be tough to get there. They're going to have to basically win out to do it, but something tells me that they are going to do their absolute best to keep an opportunity open for them to potentially make the playoffs. But that is my prediction going into week number 9 for Thursday Night Football. Make sure you are subscribed. Catch all of my predictions for Sunday on Friday afternoon. But until then, I will see you all next time. Have a good one.